Well, we're off and running now. This will be the part one of our critique for your motion assignment. We've got a ton, a ton of images to look at. So please forgive me if I skim over some of them fairly quickly. Otherwise, this is going to turn into a magnus opus that will keep you watching for the next 4 days. And I'll try to avoid that if I can. So let's get this underway. Here we have what I assume is a blur. We've got blurry fur. The little puppy dog is leaping into the air after something or sitting up trying to be cute, and he is cute. So it's an interesting technical success, but again, the picture doesn't really concentrate on where the image is. The shot is here with this dog, and maybe with this dog, both looking up at something that's over their heads. So this shot satisfies the technical requirements, but as a photograph, there's so much going on. It is so busy that it's hard to really tell what it's about. Just because you know what it's about, and you look in the middle of the viewfinder and there's the picture that you were after, doesn't mean that you can ignore all of this other stuff that's out here on the outer edges. So you really have to pay attention to those. Here we have a nice freeze. This is the perfect kind of frozen action because what it shows is action that could not be simply someone standing there. Unless this kid is actually capable of levitating, then this has to be frozen action. When we look at some of the others, note that, well, yeah, I'm sure it's frozen action, but it doesn't need to be. It's like someone standing on a skateboard. Are they actually moving or not? There's nothing in the picture to tell. This one is perfect. This one shows exactly what we're after. Here we have a very slight blur here on the outer edge of the flag that shows the wind is blowing. We could probably make this a little more exciting with a different angle, or maybe even a much slower shutter speed that would let the whole flag blur. But this does blur the edge of it. It did do it long enough to see some motion. So technically that worked. But from the photo standpoint, it's pretty static, even though it's a dramatic moment. Also, you've got this pole here. You really need to get rid of that pole. It's really in the way. Here we have a nice boat coming down the waterway there, freezing the motion with the wake coming under the bow. The flag is frozen. Everything is frozen. Okay. But what really is there to make us see this as something dramatic? Maybe a lower angle, if that were possible. Or moving along with it, this might have been a perfect one for a frozen shot where you panned with the boat and the background was blurred. This one, here's what the shot's about. It's about the boat. But we can see all of this stuff that's just extraordinarily distracting. So really start looking past the technical problems. In every shot you take, no matter what it's of or what it's for, you're likely going to have one of two issues: an issue of motion or an issue of depth of field. That's always going to be there. These assignments are to teach you to deal technically with those problems. But simply solving that problem, whether it's for an assignment for me or for your own photos, doesn't mean you can ignore the rest of the photo. Look how the shade on this boat perfectly matches this shoreline and blends into it. There's some interesting problems here. Well, this says it is motion blur, and I'm having to make a wild guess that what we're actually looking at is this water dripping off of the light? Is it raining out and that's what we're really seeing? If so, then yeah, there's blur there. The concept is interesting, but if that's the case, again, your shot is here. What is all of this stuff? Huge amounts of real estate in your shot that take your eye away from where I'm assuming the real shot is. And maybe the really interesting thing are all of these cobwebs on the light. All of that's missing in the shot. Really nice shot of the bird frozen in flight, but because he's nosediving into the edge of this image, this is one that, I mean, you catch it as you can in the camera, but this is one that you really need to crop a little differently to give him some headroom, push him a little from behind with the crop, sort of like this, and then crop that down, and this would be a pretty dramatic shot. Well, here's another one where we can assume that this is one of two things. You really did catch the ball in flight at a really interesting point. That worked really well. Or the ball is simply composited into this picture. It could have been done either way. But either way, the shot is here. The ball about to go in the basket. It's not about this tree. It's not about the contrail going through the sky. It's not about this little poofy old cloud over here or this little cloud over here. It's about this. So concentrate on that. Make this shot be about what's the real subject, the real action. If motion is the problem of the shot, then it's the motion itself, the action of the shot, that is important. So hone in on that. Zoom in on it. Make it work for you. Well, you couldn't argue that we're not seeing motion blur here. That would be difficult to argue against. Are we seeing enough of the action behind the blur to fully understand what's going on? Maybe if you were there, you would. But some of this other stuff here in front, what is this? Is this a mask falling off? Is he moving? I don't know. In this case, the blur is almost beyond the point where it leaves us with a recognizable action going on. But you certainly did catch the blur. From that kind of technical standpoint, this is great. It's probably not about this roof line. And remember what we talked about early on in focus. Your eye is going to go to those areas that are sharp. Where is that? Is it on our subject? No, by definition, it's not. It's here in the background. We don't want it to go there. So what could you do with this shot to make it this kind of almost surreal motion that would allow you to concentrate on the motion, tell the story of this action, and not distract us with this background? That's what you, as the artist of these, get to do. But the bad news is, it's what you have to do to make your shot work. And now we have a freeze of the water coming out of this faucet. Pretty flashy faucet. That's kind of an interesting looking. Some of these new faucets are pretty amazing. But if you want to catch this, you've done everything almost perfectly. There's enough backlight to show the water, and yet you've got this bright window behind the water drops. Think how much better this would show up if you'd moved around a little bit to where you're shooting more this direction and got something dark behind this so that the water stood out. Even a neutral gray like this would make the water stand out so much better. So think about foreground, background. In this case, it's great that the background is blurry. This really stands out. This is such a great start for this shot. But this is distracting. So you as the photographer have got to see every part of your image, every little part. Don't just shoot and run. Look at it through the viewfinder. Really look at all of these parts. Ask yourself, what is this shot about? It's about the water coming out of this faucet, and the faucet to some extent. What takes away from that? This. So find a way to get rid of that. And then shoot it. Okay. We'll get this hammered together and then be on to part 2.